Winners of 4 consecutive games and sitting atop the NFC West, the Seahawks are finally starting to get some national recognition. But have they truly entered the ranks of the elite as they get ready for a critical matchup against the Rams? We're going to be breaking it all down here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. My co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and I greatly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're listening in nearby Redmond, Washington, or in Moscow, Idaho, thanks to all of our listeners for making Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcasting network out there. Much appreciated for your support. We are going to be taking a look at where the Seahawks stand in the NFC hierarchy as they head into their critical matchup against the 7-2 Rams coming up this weekend at SoFi Stadium. We've got Tell the Truth Tuesday takeaways, our final bow on Sunday's win over the Cardinals, and then shifting gears to the Rams. What's new with the Rams coming up in Week 11? All this brought your way courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Winners of 4 consecutive games, the Seahawks have climbed all the way to the #2 seed in the NFC. Currently, only the Philadelphia Eagles ahead of them in the NFC standings. They technically are tied for first place with the Rams, but they hold the tiebreaker with the better NFC West record. So the Seattle Seahawks sitting there at #2 in the NFC, and people nationally are starting to take notice of where the Seahawks are at right now, which that usually gives you an idea where this team, this organization sits. When people nationally start talking about the Seattle Seahawks, that usually means they have entered that elite hierarchy. And you and I talked about this a few weeks back that we needed to see a little bit more. Have we reached that point where we've seen enough now with these couple dominant wins over the Commanders and Cardinals that we have to view the Seahawks as one of the NFC's elite, like they stand in the standings? Or is there still something yet that needs to be proven with this massive game coming up in LA?
Yeah, I think there absolutely does, Corbin. If the Seahawks want to be considered elite, then they have to beat the elite teams. And this is going to be your opportunity right here on the road against the Los Angeles Rams. As you mentioned before, 7-2. The Seahawks, of course, are 7-2. The Philadelphia Eagles, owners of the #1 seed, the only seed that gets a bye in the playoffs, the way the NFL has it constructed now, also at 7-2. As it stands right now, the Seahawks would be hosting the Green Bay Packers at 5-3-1. If there was a playoff game to be played at Lumen Field this upcoming weekend rather than on the road again against the LA Rams. Interestingly enough, the LA Rams at 7-2 would actually be the 5 seed. They would be playing on the road at Tampa Bay, which is kind of interesting because Tampa Bay is at 6-3, has actually a worse record than the Los Angeles Rams. And as you mentioned, the only reason the Seahawks currently have the tiebreaker over the Rams is because Seattle has the better divisional record, a 2-1, whereas the Rams are 1-1. So many things are at play here in this interdivisional matchup against the Los Angeles Rams. Obviously, if the Seahawks lose to the Rams, then they would then have 3 losses. The Rams would only have 2. They would lose a spot in the standings in terms of the NFC West. They also would drop down to at least the #5 seed because, again, they would basically be losing that spot to the Rams, and they would be dropping down in the rest of the NFC rankings as well.
I've been torn. Our essential question coming into this, where do the Seahawks stand on the NFC's hierarchy or the NFL's hierarchy? I've been torn on this thinking about it today because I understand some of the arguments that are being made by people outside of Seattle that you look at the schedule. I mean, the Cardinals they're 3-6. You are what your record says you are. And Seattle took care of business, thumped them on Sunday. The weekend before that, the Commanders, they have struggled mightily this year with such high expectations. They've had the injuries, Jaden Daniels most notably. So I understand that argument, and yet at the same time, the Arizona Cardinals had the Green Bay Packers and the Indianapolis Colts on the ropes in back-to-back weeks. And they just were coming off of a big win that looked like it was going to maybe thrust them back into a position they could get some momentum and maybe play back into the wild card hunt. And then Seattle came out and just said, nope, that's not happening. 35 unanswered points out of the gate, and the Cardinals had no chance to make it back, even with a really good third quarter. They were so far behind, there was no way they were going to get caught up. And Seattle did the same thing to the Commanders the week before. And look, Washington, a bunch of their games they've lost this year, Jaden Daniels was not playing. Jaden Daniels played most of that game before he suffered that elbow injury. So that was one of the more complete wins in terms of going against their best, with the Commanders having their starting quarterback. Like, I think you can make some counter arguments to that. And the fact of the matter is the Saints have played some teams tough, even though their record isn't great. Seattle blew them out of the water at Lumen Field. We have seen this team really elevate their play since that loss. I mean, look, that loss to Tampa Bay, they put up 35 points. They just had a bazillion injuries on defense. They were trying to mesh some new guys. So I'm going to say right now, this team belongs in the NFC's elite. But if you want to truly show that, this game coming up on Sunday, I'm not going to sit here and say that it is a 100% must win, because Seattle has another game against the Rams later this season. They've got a bunch of games left on the schedule. The Rams have plenty of hard games left to play as well. At the same time, if you want that number one seed, these are the games you have to win. And Seattle had those close slip-ups the last couple of years at home against the Rams. They've actually played better in LA against the Rams. I'm curious to see if that trend continues in this football game. But this is how you stamp that elite status, just like you're getting it from an airport, an airline company. You want that elite status, you got to go earn it by beating the best team that you've had on your schedule so far, that being the LA Rams on the road. You get that done, you think people are talking now. There's going to be a lot more talking about the Seattle Seahawks squad if they can find a way to get it done. But I think they have done enough to this point. They're number 2 seed for a reason. They're 7-2 for a reason. This has been as complete of a football team as anybody. They have a better point differential than anybody in the NFL. And I think we have a big enough sample size now, Rob, that starts to really add up in terms of being a big part of your resume.
No question about it. I'm not at all surprised. I mean, you might remember I predicted this team to be 13-4 at the end of the season. However, I also predicted them to lose both games against the Los Angeles Rams. I just think that the Rams have more firepower, and I am hoping to be wrong on that case. Certainly, but at the same time, I just think that the season, in the case of the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks to this point, has gone about as I expected that it would. But that said, I certainly am not going to argue with you too hard on the idea of the Seahawks being a terrific football team. Again, elite is a little bit rich for me at this point, but I think you can make a strong argument that other than the one snap in which Sam Darnold had the ball knocked out of his hands against the San Francisco 49ers to get that very first loss, and then the fact that DeMarcus Lawrence was not on the field for the Seahawks against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think that's an entirely different football game if he is on the field. And so, again, I think that you could make an argument that Seattle should, instead of being 7-2 right now, they could be 9-0. And I think that they are, as you said, arguably the most well-rounded team in all of the NFL. So I do think that they are just a hair away from the conversation about being elite. But frankly, I don't know if there is an elite team in the NFL this year. I think the parity is really holding true this particular season. And so for me, the elite teams are the teams that, is currently holding up wearing a Super Bowl ring, that being the Philadelphia Eagles, who, of course, in terms of record, is, again, ahead of Seattle, and the only team that's ahead of Seattle in the NFC standings.
Yep, the Eagles, until they're dethroned, like that's the team that is going to be on top. They've certainly looked vulnerable in a number of games. They did not look good last night. I thought Philadelphia and Green Bay both looked like pretenders last night. That was not a well-played football game. Some real coaching questions. It does feel right now, though, like the stars are aligning. If the Seahawks can keep that trajectory going upward right now, like, they're as good as anybody. And it feels like a lot of these teams have big weaknesses, but we are going to find out a lot about both these teams coming up on Sunday in LA, because the Seahawks and Rams are the only two teams in the NFL that are in the top 5 in offense and defense scoring wise this year. And now they get to duke it out for the first time of their 2 matchups in the NFC West. We're going to have tons on the Rams coming up later in this show. But first, we got more to talk about this Cardinals game. Rob, your first opportunity since the post-game show to really dive in with some thoughts coming out of that season sweep victory over the Arizona Cardinals. We'll get to that coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. As the days get shorter and the nights come earlier, it can start to feel a little heavier, especially when life is already packed with work, family, and everything else. This season, it's so important to reach out and check in with friends, family, or even yourself, just like checking on a teammate or reconnecting with someone you haven't seen in a while can lift your spirits. Reaching out for therapy can make a real difference too. BetterHelp makes the first step easier by connecting you with a licensed therapist online from wherever you are. I've noticed that simply talking things through, even for a few minutes, helps clear my mind, and it gets me back on track. Over 5 million people have used BetterHelp, and with 30,000 therapists available, finding support really is just a few clicks away. This month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it simple to take that first step. Listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn, because taking that step towards support might just leave you wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a real game changer. Their TradeMaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother. Join the free TradeMaster program today and score some serious perks in priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHNFL for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks improving to 7-2, jumping to the number 2 seed in the NFC with a 44-22 thumping of the Cardinals on Sunday. Rob, as we do every Tuesday, we're going to put a bow on this game. The Seahawks certainly have already moved on from this victory. We take a little bit longer because we're not going to be playing this upcoming weekend. But nonetheless, want to get a chance to kind of dive into some extended thoughts coming out of this game before we fully turn the page to Sunday's massive matchup against the Rams. On the offensive side of the football, what's something that really jumped out to you about this football game for the Seahawks?
Well, I think that one of the reasons why the Seahawks are 7-2 is, of course, they have been relatively healthy, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And so when the center, Jalen Sundell, went down with injury and Olu Oluwatimi was inserted into the football game, especially after, not too long after getting inserted in the football game, he and Sam Darnold had a fumbled snap exchange. I thought, oh my goodness, here you go. This could be problems. And so I was really eager to watch the All-22 and isolate Olu Oluwatimi in terms of pass protection and run blocking. Now, I can't say that he was quite as good as Sundell has been to this point in the season in terms of pass protection, but he was very good. But in the running game, he was absolutely dominant. He was terrific. He and Anthony Bradford had at least 3 knockdown blocks that I saw, including one on Zach Charbonnet's touchdown run. And so I do think that there is reason for optimism for those Seahawks fans out there who are waiting for the running game to get going. Ola Oluwatimi, I think, is going to help in that regard. It is not a coincidence that Seattle had its biggest rushing game to date of this season with Oluwatimi giving most of the snaps in this football game.
And I know that Zach Charbonnet in particular was fired up to have Oluwatimi in front of him because there were a number of big runs that Charbonnet had, especially that 13-play, 79-yard drive where the center had a key block either at the line of scrimmage or at the second level, his 30-yarder. He got to the second level. It opened up that cutback crease for Zach Charbonnet. But I want to switch the narrative here away from what's going on in the center position. And I kind of hit on this a teeny bit yesterday in our mailbag segment, but I'm going to say it again, just for everybody that plays fantasy football, it's a ton of fun, and everybody's got to understand that it's a game. It's supposed to be fun. But if you're somebody that is throwing shade at Clint Kubiak because he isn't giving Ken Walker all the carries at the goal line or even most of the carries at the goal line, you need to get over yourself. Like, I understand the fantasy football aspect, but like, the Seattle Seahawks want to win football games. That's what they care about. They don't care if your team's like back in the day when the crybaby Cutlers were trying to win the championship and I was the general manager. Like, there were a few games this happened to me where I had a touchdown vulture as a number 2. That's what Zach Charbonnet has turned into a lot of those goal line situations. But like, Clint Kubiak has every right to do that. And the Seahawks had one of the 10 most efficient rushing teams inside the 10-yard line this year. They were 29th a year ago. They are in the top 10 this year. And a big reason why is the usage of Zach Charbonnet and now George Holani as well. Like, let the coach cook. Let Clint Kubiak get after it and let him do what he thinks is best in those situations. He knows his offense. He knows his personnel groupings. This is not a shot at Ken Walker III. He's going to get his chances to score touchdowns. But when they're in short yardage, you want the battering ram. You want the guy that can plow his way forward or be in the middle, jumping midair like he did in his touchdown and still have the power to manage to get the ball over the goal line even when getting a hit in midair. That is what Zach Charbonnet gives you. So let Clint Kubiak do it. He has every right to use a running back for a goal line package. The really good teams do that. I'm sorry it's hurting your fantasy team. I really am. Not really. But Zach Charbonnet has proven he is well-deserved of those carries in the short yardage and goal line situations, and the Seahawks are winning games because of it. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball, and it's interesting. We're going to let you kind of pour some water on the fire a little bit when it comes to Tyrese Knight.
Well, it's funny because Tyrese Knight, I gave him a game ball after, his incredible performance against the Arizona Cardinals. And I really wanted to make sure that I acknowledge the statistics. He led the team with 9 tackles. He led the team in solo tackles with 6, tackles for loss with 2, sacks with 2, forced fumbles with 2. Obviously, it was his forced fumbles that DeMarcus Lawrence got that returned for those 2 touchdowns. So an unbelievable performance on the stat sheet. However, as I mentioned before with Ola Oluwatimi, really looking forward to kind of watching the All-22 tape. When I did put on the All-22 tape with Tyrese Knight, there were a number of plays that he did not make. That is a little bit troubling, especially to consider, the quality of the opponent that Seattle is going to be facing this upcoming week. Now, who knows, maybe Ernest Jones is going to be back on the field for the Seahawks. He wants to be, just given the magnitude of the game, the fact that he was drafted originally by the Los Angeles Rams, all of those things. But at the same time, Tyrese Knight, he has good instincts and he's very slippery. He is a very good pass rusher, but at the same time, he does struggle to get off blocks. When blockers get to him, he struggles to break their wrist, disengage, and make the play. He typically has to kind of spin backward away from the blocker, and that's sacrificing yardage. So he has to be better in terms of run defense if Seattle is going to win this game. If he's starting, win this game against the Los Angeles Rams, because they will run their football effectively.
And I want to give some praise to Rick Woolen because, look, you and I are both this way. Like, we call things as we see it. And there were a lot of plays in the first 6-7 games where Riq Woolen was not finishing. He was missing tackles. He was giving up crucial catches at the end of games when he was in position to make a play, particularly that opener. There's been all those trade rumors that were out there too, questions about his fit. Look, I think Riq Woolen, ever since the Texans game, that's really when it seemed like the light switch was starting to come back on for him. That game, the Tampa Bay game he came out, actually was the Texans game. He was the game he came back for. He was not out there when they played against Tampa Bay, but Jacksonville was the game that he missed. But Houston, that was the game that Riq Woolen really started to put it together. And he had a couple nice pass breakups against the Texans. He had a really solid game in Washington as well. And then this week, 2 catches on 8 targets. He forced 2 incompletions. One of them was a fantastic play against Trey McBride in the end zone that it would have been really easy for him to grab on the back of the tight end and get a pass interference penalty. But he got both of his arms stretched out in front and managed to do it without making illegal contact or impede the receiver from trying to go get the football, and knocked it down in the end zone. He is playing really good football these last 2 or 3 games. Mike Macdonald has been saying as much. It's showing up on the film. And even though he got trucked a couple times in Sunday's game by Trey McBride on the sideline, he had some nice tackles in open field as well in that game. It seems like the confidence is starting to come back a little bit for Riq Woolen, and that he truly looks like he is all the way back from whatever issues he was having in terms of playing at full speed and with full confidence. It seems like he has turned the corner now here at the midway point of the season.
I 100% agree with you. He's playing terrific football. And yeah, I would argue that Devin Witherspoon, based on what I saw again on the aforementioned All-22 tape, Devin Witherspoon has kind of regained the mantle as far as being Seattle's top cornerback. And not that he necessarily had ever lost it, but the reality is that he did miss several games this year. And when he was on the football field against the Arizona Cardinals previously, I mean, he gave up a couple of those touchdowns that made that game, that made that into a game back in Glendale. But I thought that he was terrific against the Cardinals this time around. Now, he did surrender another touchdown, this to Marvin Harrison Jr., but it was an unbelievable throw and catch, by Jacoby Brissett, a veteran, and just put the ball where no corner of his size is going to be able to go up against a 6'3" receiver. That's just the way things are going to go sometimes. But his instincts in coverage, the way that he anticipates routes and is already changing directions, just reading the receiver and the quarterback, the way that he so unselfishly plays the run. I mean, he is always outside and taking on lead blockers and pushing the action back where he has the cavalry waiting to get the running back or quarterback, if that be the case. And it just was impressive to see the way that he has been inserted back into Seattle starting lineup and just adds that much more speed, that much more playmaking ability to a defense. The statistics don't say that Devin Witherspoon is playing at a high level, but if he does play as well against the Los Angeles Rams as he did against the Arizona Cardinals this past week, Corbin, that's a huge, huge thing for the Seahawks in their pursuit of the victory.
You mentioned it earlier with Oluwatimi, how much he might be able to help the run game. I want to real quick talk about how a skill player can help the run game too. Look, I know that Rashid Shaheed only had 1 catch for 3 yards in his debut. Just didn't get a lot of – they threw the ball. They had 13 attempts. Like, it's not like they had a lot of opportunities for any receiver to catch the football in this game with the way things played out, all the running in the second half. But Shaheed had 2 carries, one of them being on an end-around reverse, and it was a pitch, an end-around pitch that he got 10 yards on. And that play had some of the – it had some of the candy that you're looking to get defenses sucked in on. You had 2 other guys in the backfield. You had cross patterns there out of the backfield that are really messing with the linebacker's eye. And then you pitch it back to Shaheed. He gets 10 yards. And then they used him as an actual running back on a toss sweep, and he got 10 yards on that play. That might not seem like a big deal, but those are 2 explosive runs that they had from a wide receiver. And when you have the ability to mix in the orbit motions, the jet sweep motions, the fly sweep motions, all those different kinds of things that you can add. Like, to me, that's not being cute. Like, that's putting new wrinkles and new dressings on your plays. It's the Percy Harvin effect. That's what made Seattle's run game even better when Percy Harvin, the few times he was healthy, the threat of having the ability to hand it off to him or toss it to him. Shaheed has that kind of athletic ability and that kind of talent running the football. That could have a domino effect on what happens with all their regular run plays because of what he brings to the equation. So he's a guy I think has a chance to be a real difference maker in the run game front. When we come back, we've got the LA Rams, Seattle Seahawks coming up round 1 on Sunday, 2-7-2 teams. What's new with the Rams coming into this first matchup at SoFi Stadium? We'll dig in coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I'm so excited about the new jeans I have arriving soon from Duer. They're antibacterial, meaning your jeans stay fresh longer so you can wear more and wash less. Duer combines classic jeanswear style with the kind of comfort and performance you expect from athletic wear. It's truly the best of both worlds, designed to look great and stay comfortable all day, no matter what you're doing. Simply put, Duer makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. Get a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift by going over to shopduer.com/LockedOnSeattle. You'll get 15% off your first order. That's shopduer.com/LockedOnSeattle for 15% off. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, don't forget to check out the Locked On NFL podcast twice a day. You start off with Tyler Rowland, and he's dishing out all the hot takes in the first episode. And then you can go to the barbershop with Tony Wiggins, insight analysis you won't get anywhere else around the NFL. That's Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. The Seahawks now transitioning into the biggest game on their schedule, maybe the biggest game in the NFL so far this year. 2-7-2 teams, Seahawks and Rams, set to battle at SoFi Stadium. Stakes couldn't be any higher, at least for this stage of the season, a chance to not only get a teeny bit of separation in the division, but truly emerge as a threat for that number 1 seed in the NFC. There's a lot on the line, and this is a Rams team, Rob, that there's been a few changes, but generally speaking, this is a lot of the same cast of characters that Seattle played against, at least in the first matchup last year. A lot of the same guys, Matthew Stafford running the offense, a lot of the same young defenders that broke out last year. Got to deal with Jared Verse and company. They didn't have a ton of big additions, but the one thing they did do, as Seahawks fans know, Cooper Kupp now being in a Seattle uniform, they cut Cooper Kupp and they signed Devontae Adams to pair him with Puka Nacua, giving them one of the best 1-2 punches in the NFL. And they've also incorporated a lot more 2 and 3 tight end looks. There's some differences in how they're running their offense, but the Adams addition was clearly the marquee one made by the Rams this year. They traded out of the first round, haven't really gotten a lot of impact from their rookie class, but they had so many players returning from last year's team. And with Devontae Adams being added, that you also look at the fact they have been really healthy. They've got 3 players on injured reserve, nobody on the PUP. And generally, this has been a really healthy football team to this point. So that has helped them get off to this 7-2 start.
No question about it, Corbin. Like when we were talking before about, the elite teams, and I mentioned the Los Angeles Rams as being a team that I still think is, right there. Not not only because of their record, but because, as you just mentioned, that they have stayed healthy. And that, of course, was a huge question mark with Matthew Stafford. I mean, there was all this talk that his back injury may even force him to retire before the season began. Instead, he's playing at an MVP level. I love the fact that you mentioned Davante Adams. I mean, he just leads the NFL in touchdown receptions. So for all of the folks out here in Seattle who are just giddy with Jackson Smith and Jigba's production, and obviously with 1,041 receiving yards after just 9 games. I mean, they should be giddy, but he's got 5 touchdown receptions. Davante Adams has 9. And he is supposedly the second guy, behind Puka Nacua. So again, the fact that Matthew Stafford has these 2 dynamic wide receivers, the fact that Seattle has some pretty dynamic cornerbacks, as we kind of were talking about just a moment ago, it's one of the reasons why this is such an exciting matchup. The line of scrimmage is another reason. You mentioned Jared Verse, Braden Fisk being another one. Former Seahawk that is now a key member of the Los Angeles Rams, and Poona Ford. He's played in all 9 games for them, started 4 of them. He's got 25 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack. So Poona Ford is one of the significant additions to the Los Angeles Rams. And I think that we have to mention Nate Landman, the inside linebacker. He was a player I was really high on coming out of Colorado. He had some injury issues, and that's one of the reasons why he, wasn't drafted nearly as high as I thought that he should have been. But he leads the Rams in tackles so far this season. He's got 3 forced fumbles in just 9 games. It's the 3rd consecutive year that he has had 3 forced fumbles. Previously was with the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, this is a good football player, instinctive player. So a guy that, while you're right, the Rams have not had a lot of turnover on their roster. Some of the players that they have brought in have been very, very effective. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention former University of Washington standout Coleman Shelton. He is their center. He started all 9 games for them this year. Had spent last year with Chicago after initially being drafted by the Los Angeles Rams about 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, that seems to be something the Rams are comfortable doing. They'll have a guy that leaves for a year or 2, and then they'll bring him back. And they've done that plenty of times, but they didn't have a high volume in free agency changes. The ones that they have made, though, have been significant, whether it's been Adams. Ford's been a really nice addition. To Seahawks fans know, a really solid football player. And so they were able to take an already really good roster, and they were able to supplement it with a few guys that have been upgrades in what they're wanting to do. So that's why they're 7-2. And they have been not flawless. There have been some games that they have looked vulnerable, but certainly it's been a team that they had the Eagles on the ropes, then the Eagles came back and ended up beating them. They've had a couple other games. They let the Ravens hang around with them closer than people thought they were going to. Like, this has been a team that's had a few games that haven't played out exactly like they thought it was going to be, but they find ways to get it done. And when they score points, they can do it in a hurry. This is a team that'll put a lot of points on the board in bunches, as the Seahawks have done. Both these teams have a lot of similarities, and I think it'll be really fun for us to dive into that on our Matchup Wednesday episode tomorrow. There will be a lot of familiar names from past matchups, and yet you can expect there's going to be some newcomers thrown into the mix as well compared to previous battles between these 2 teams. So we will dive into that on tomorrow's show. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, it's all about the key matchups. Luckily, no Aaron Donald, but you've got to deal with plenty of other really good players for the Los Angeles Rams. We'll be looking at all those key positional battles on tomorrow's show. Make sure to listen in. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.